Good afternoon, everyone. Are you all hearing me?
Good afternoon. Hearing you loud and clear.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, one and all. So it is really good, and we would like to welcome you to the first episode of the Coaches Corner, held by the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Geoffrey Edwards, president of the association. I want to say thank you very much for coming out. On the call as well, we have with us the Tobago representative of the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Richard Goddard, who is present. And to all the coaches who are on the call and to those who will be joining, thank you very much. Today, we are going to be speaking futsal and the talent ID. As you see on the presentation, we have with us Mr. Ben Tadmor. Ben is the former assistant head coach of the England futsal national team, men that is. He's also a FIFA UEFA B Futsal Coach Educator and a former England Futsal Talent ID lead, which means that he is very much the person to speak to when it comes to this topic that we are going to present. More so, we are very much happy to say that Ben will be joining us in Tobago. He will actually be arriving in Tobago from the 7th, where he would be the lead instructor for the futsal youth camp that will be held over the 4-day period of the 11th to the 14th of April, where we'll be catering to over 100 kids between the ages of 7 to 17 as regards to the rudiments of futsal. This is just a part of the association's strategic plan, where we have all intentions of continuing the growth of futsal in Trinidad and Tobago, and talent identification is just one of those. To the coaches who are not yet a part of the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago, feel free to reach out to us at futsaltt@gmail.com, or you can contact us via WhatsApp at 787-7678. Once again, 787-7678. Why coaches? Because we intend to take the knowledge that we are going to get here and other inputs to be able to spread the gospel of futsal throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, you're a major stakeholder to this. So on behalf of the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago and all of the executives, thank you very much for taking the time. And to Mr. Tadmor, thank you very much for taking the time as well to present us. Over to you, sir.
Firstly, thank you very much. Just double check you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, loud and clear.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm looking forward to just sharing my own experience in the England Futsal Programme and what Talent ID meant to us. I think it's probably fair enough to sort of request a bit of a background for me. I've been involved in futsal for probably about 18 years now. Was one of the first people to be involved over in England. There's a small group of us, so we've been through a lot with futsal. As a coach, that's in excess of 20 years now, and predominantly with what we would call the foundation phase, so 5 to 12-year-olds, but experience all the way through to adults as well. So in terms of talent ID, wow, it's a fairly broad subject, but we will try and cover some basics tonight. Very much focused on the structure that we put in place in the England programme and why we did that, and then we can have a bit of a chat towards the end around what this might look like for whatever environment you're in. Okay, so thanks very much. Any questions, then either pop them on the chat if there is one. If not, then feel free just to ask. I've got no problems with that whatsoever. It's probably important to try and define and separate talent ID and talent development. So talent ID is the process of recognising current participants with the potential to achieve expertise in a particular sport. Whereas development is providing the most appropriate learning environment to realise that potential. In crude terms, you're probably looking at scouting as opposed to coaching. So we're looking at a process of talent ID, what we did around that, and the challenges we faced in the England Futsal Programme. But that is how we define it in this situation. So the aim of our Talent ID program is fairly simple. We've got various pictures there on the screen where we've got players that have featured in youth teams. So the bottom left one is an England under-19, the first ever England under-19 team. The challenge of getting a player into the senior squads, into the European Championships, through various different formats. But our aim in terms of our Talent ID program was to backfill the England futsal squad with a layer of under 17 to under 19 men ready to take those places in those teams. Football. It seems odd to talk football when this is futsal, but it has such an impact on our program that we have to start there, and it's really important that we start there because we have to understand our talent pool and where we can recruit from, because it's all well and good us going in and saying I want the very best player, but actually we've really got to put some thought into where do we find those players. And the challenge that football has, well, the monopoly that football has, is a real challenge to futsal, but not just futsal, it's also all sports, as we'll talk about here. So it's up to between 10 and 12,000 boys in the pro games youth football development system. So that's all the way from Premier League all the way down into level 4, I think it is. And those levels will be explained in a moment on another slide. In the Premier League academies alone, there's 3,500 boys in that, ranging from under 9 when they're first signed all the way up to 18. It's a huge amount of boys in that program. And they are the very best in the country, very best. To compete on an international stage in futsal against countries where futsal is far more developed, we're going to need to find players of that ability and the ability to play futsal. And so it would be crazy for us to look anywhere else other than football to begin with. So that talent pool is ready-made for us. And so that's a huge advantage, but it comes with a huge challenge as well. I'm not the only one, though. I went to a conference, a UK coaching conference, and it was the Talent ID leads from across the country. Ended up speaking to heads of hockey and rugby, and I was speaking to the chap from Rugby Union, who said as soon as he hears any of the potential targets he has is playing football, he'll just back off because he can't match the football programs, he can't match the experiences purely because of the money involved in football. So it is a real monopoly that the top athletes at the moment are in the football system. But as you'll see from the next slide, only 0.5% of players registered to a football academy as a child make a living from football as an adult. So that's 0.5%, which is such a small amount. So that to me is a huge opportunity. And so our problem was quite simple in the fact that we wanted to understand how we could attract the best players from football while simultaneously developing our own player pathway. And that's a challenge which we will probably share with you. And how do we share limited athletes or athletes of multi-sports, so who are proficient in football, for example? They might be talented athletic athletes as well. And how do we persuade them that futsal is an opportunity that they should look at? Because at the moment it offers less financial reward than football, but in terms of experiences, it can certainly match and offer different opportunities. So we'll have a quick look at that. So I mentioned levels a moment ago. If we assume these are all the levels of football in England that we have. So we have all the pro game, which is down to level 4. And then we begin our step program. And step 1 to step 7 is considered not professional. They're trying to change, I think, step 1 because the National League which is what was previously known as the conference, they're all full-time athletes now. So we have got athletes ranging from level 1 to level 11, where the money stops probably at around level 8. It changes between different clubs and things like that, but players can get paid to some degree all the way down to step 4, level 8, which means if we are developing futsal clubs and we want to place talented athletes in those futsal clubs, we've got to convince players to drop out of whatever academy they're in, or even when they're released from that academy, and we've got to ask them to turn down the opportunity to earn money from something that they have been training for since they were 5 years old. Now, that's a huge temptation for them, and that's a really difficult thing. So we have to be really clear with what our opportunities are that we're giving these players. I think it's safe to assume that if you're a Premier League player in a Premier League academy, which the majority have, academy systems in England have different categories based on what you can offer a player. So if you're a Category 1 academy, which an awful lot of the Premier Leagues are, if you get released from that, the chances are you're going to drop down to a Category 2 academy, and then a Category 3 academy if you get released from there. And that takes you all the way down there, and eventually you'll end up in this adult game. So although there's a huge amount of players, trying to get them to choose futsal is our starting point, because we need to give them the opportunity to play and experience the game. I remember our lead coach, saying that we only had the players with us for 14% of their season. So they've really, if we've only got them for 14%, the other, what was my maths like, 86% has got to be a really, really good environment for them. So we've got to make sure that we're asking these players that have come from Premier League situations, Premier League environments or Championship environments, we've got to try and match that and better that in the futsal world. So it's about the environment that we create for those players. So the real question is, where do we position ourselves? Where are we trying to target? Is there any point in us aiming for anyone in the first 4 levels? The reality is it's probably not. Based on contracts, based on released, based on silly things like insurance for players when they're with us. If they get released, can we afford their insurance? If there's injuries, things like that. So it's a whole different ballgame. So actually, where can we pull from? So we ended up looking around here. That's the reality. So the first 5.5 levels pretty much are out of our control. We can't accept any of those unless those players drop down into the next levels. This is very much around the older age groups, I should add, at the moment. So if we're talent IDing older and we want to try and feed them into our system earlier on, this is why we're talking about that at the moment. So our talent pool of 10 to 12,000 players is now halved. And the challenge for us is that we need to get 2, 3, maybe a season to try and get them into the system. So in our opinion, it's perfectly doable. But it's certainly a challenge. Now, equally, you have your own challenges. Being on an island, being on a fairly small population, in terms of players or athletes being in demand, and how do everyone wanting them to join their sport. So it's the environment that we talk about is really key. So we talked about a little bit about what did we have to offer. Well, in terms of for those footballers, we had a really different technical and tactical playing challenge. Anyone who's played the game understands the constraints of the game, the limitations, the size of the pitch, the lines. It offers a real different challenge compared to football. And some players naturally are enthused and inspired by that. They naturally love the different challenges, especially the tactical side of things. A lot of the players, absolutely buzzed off that. but it's a really hard thing for them to learn. So trying to find good learners with the right attitudes is a really difficult challenge. Playing experiences that are unattainable in football. If I said to you that I am, I'm a very lucky person, but even from a coaching perspective, I've managed to coach in the Champions League, coach in the European Championships, and coach in a World Cup campaign as well. And the players are experiencing that as well. They're experiencing those moments, things that just aren't attainable unless you're in the top 4 teams in the English Premier League, Champions League, European Football Championship, things like that. So you're giving them experiences which they won't be able to attain in football. Representing your country is something that they probably won't be able to attain in football because we're not reaching for the same level of players. England are playing right now at the moment. Those players, they're not even going to think twice about futsal. Whereas we've got an England team or former England players who that's what they lived and breathed, and that's what they were proud to represent. The next thing we can do is offer coaching excellence. And I genuinely believe that we were able to do that. I genuinely believe that the coaching information that these players were given was world class. The practices, the thought, the process was brilliant. And actually, we've had an awful lot of feedback from an awful lot of countries asking for us for help and information around our curriculum and how we develop players. Because as a nation and as the FA, they've always been fairly world class and market leading in terms of coach education. The big thing with futsal, and I think this is one of the main key driving forces that we had in England, is that it can link in with an education program. So if you've dropped out of football at 15 to sort of 18, there are education programs with full-time futsal opportunities, and that was a key moment for us. That allow players to train full-time in futsal every day, play futsal in competitions as well, and also get educated at the same time. So that was a real game changer for us, and we had an awful lot of success in our university program. So offering that to players who, if they've fallen out of the game, that's an opportunity for them as well. So in terms of what do we do in England? Well, we tried to package up this program of a playing experience, traveling experience, competition experience, education experience, and try to sell that to players. And to do that, we, in the hope that we could get the highest caliber of player to buy into what we're doing and buy into the program. Right, so that's football. That's recruiting from football. At this point in 2018, we had 574 futsal teams in England, of which in Tier 1, the reality was that we had, I think it was 10 teams at the time. 10 teams at the time where English players could play for and play to. And at that level, the reality was that level was the highest level that we needed people to be playing at in order to be considered as developing within the England program as well. So although we had a fairly large number of teams, our talent futsal purists or pure futsal players, it was very, very small. The amazing thing was the teams and the clubs all developing, desperate to get their next generation of players coming through. And they were really supportive of that. And the amazing thing is that they're still doing that. They're still trying to work hard to get the next generation of players through in their clubs. And I think that's absolutely vital. So their development pathways and their player pathways is important. So we had a really a small talent pool of futsal, huge but really hard to access talent pool of footballers in the England program. And that's where our journey began. So to help us access and develop and identify players, we established something called the England Futsal Regional Talent Centre programme. And these were really geographically located next to the main Tier 1 from that previous slide. You've seen those Tier 1 clubs up here. And then in tier 1, anyone competing in there, we would try and have a regional talent centre within a 30-minute travel distance of that centre, so that we could not only help them recruit players as well, so that we can put players into their programs. And we ran quite an exhaustive program to recruit locally from that area. And there'll be a slide in a minute which you'll see to the depths that we went to try and find players to join those programs. And within these regional talent centres, we had testing days and coaching days, so they were separated. We'll talk a little bit more about the testing days in a moment, and that might be of some interest to some of you around. We had to hang our hat on some practices that we wanted to help define what we thought might be good identifiers in terms of what technical excellence looks like in futsal. So we started looking at that. And then we also from that had, as well as them running individually around the country and geographically, we then brought them together and used that as direct means to recruit an under-17 team with the aim of becoming an under-19 England team to represent in the European Championships. So our under-17s, in order to access the England under-17s, if you were in the professional game, so if you're at an academy in the pro game football, you went directly to the under-17s, straight in, and we would look at you there, and we would try and throw as much of you information at you as possible and see if we could get you to buy in. Now, the rest of them, all of these other clubs, all these other areas, these are the main areas that we would visit and try and recruit from for these RTC programs, the regional talent centres. So you have to turn over an awful lot of leaves in order and dig under an awful lot of rocks in order to find these players and get them to come in, because they just don't know about the game yet. They don't know. I've still not really had anyone join in and go, this isn't for me. There's a lot of people who fat out their depth, but there's an awful lot of people who just go, this is brilliant, give me more. And that's what futsal does to you. It's like a bug. Once you get the futsal bug, you're in it, and they could really see the benefits of it. And we fully know that some of them were using us in order to upskill their football skills. No problem with that, because I think that we would have been able to persuade them either way to come on our futsal journey with us. The RTC testing days. Now, they were really busy days, and we'd try and get two groups of 30 in a day, so 60 days in each centre, 60 kids in each centre. Were a series of technical challenges, which gave us data, and this data was was compared against the exact same tests which were completed by the England senior men's team and the England under-23 squad. So everyone in our pathway had comparable data, and we were able to understand that in order to get to the seniors, these are the sort of levels you need to get to. Now, the really important bit on this slide is the purpose to plan for future player in the advance of the current England squad. And what I mean by that is, if we only reach the levels of the current squad, so if they're 17-year-olds and they're hitting the same levels of that 25-year-old, we're only going to be at that level again. And we're planning for the future, and we wanted to be top 20. So we had to find players that would push us in advance of the current England squad. So the seniors set benchmarks, and the challenge for the 17s in these tests were to beat them and to go through them and to set new benchmarks. And that's quite an ask. And to continuously drive the program forward, you have to do that. You have to set those technical benchmarks. Now, those testings were based on our playing philosophy and what we thought would be the key areas of development for us going forwards. So they would be player passing speed, so ball speed, so who can pass quickly and accurately over various distances. We wanted players that could threaten a goal from 10 to 15 meters, because that's not something that we really had in the England squad at the moment. at that time. So who had the ability, the technical ability and the power to threaten threaten the goal from distance. And those of you who follow futsal will understand quite how helpful and what an amazing tool that is to have in your locker as a player in order to cause all sorts of problems for the opposition. So the testing was based around our future player and what we wanted. And the reason they were technical was because actually we reached a level, in our opinion, within the England senior game, was that we had tactical plans we want to put in place, but we couldn't put them in place because of technical deficiencies. So we were asking players to do things which they weren't ready for, and we could plainly see, not ready for, weren't able to deliver yet. We could plainly see that they weren't able to kick us on to the next levels that we wanted to reach. So we needed more technically advanced players coming through as well. It's important to remember, though, that these technical tests only supported coaching opinion. They weren't the decision maker in anything. They were helped to, when we're having discussions around players, and there's always a bit of coaches see different things. We would then have this information to talk about, and it also helps benchmark our development as we go through the age groups. So we always used, as well as the tests, we always used a scouting form. So there's some red lines at what point players can't access the next level on the pathway without having a robust scouting assessment being taken of them. And the key around player scouting assessments is that they are multiple and they are delivered by varied coaches. So you're not getting the same bias by the same coaches the whole time. You're getting different eyes looking at different things and getting a better understanding of what talent is from a coaching perspective across your workforce, but also fully understanding what players we want and how we can get them through. So if you look at, I mean, they're quite crude, some of the titles, but they're not very complicated. But we're just looking at what we want. So ball retention, manipulating the ball in tight areas, that's all subjective. So are we looking at the same things as each other? I think the grey parameters at the top is probably a key identifier for you. The fact that these are the levels we've got, and only level 5 was the England senior level. And you can see that we had a level 6 and a level 7. And that's the areas we really wanted to target and get players in. So if you're reaching level 5, you're not going to be good enough to take place of the England team. You need to be going the next, current England player. You need to be level 6 or 7 in order to be replacing those players. So there's some key moments, as you'll see here. Every time there's a red line, that scouting assessment needs to take place. And these were our targets, our player targets and our numbers targets that we had to hit all the way through in order to make sure that we were seeing enough players. So we had 200 coming from the regional talent centres, 20 in the under 17s that we wanted to see, 10 back into the under 23s. Our target was to get 2 in the seniors. That was the challenge each season. So it's an awful lot in order to try and get those extra players in, those 1 or 2. Part of these programs is to make sure that there's always an individual development plan, and this is an agreement or feedback between player and coach, where there is a really clear identifier between. And this is just a really sort of a really football example that a lot of the kids use at the moment based on FIFA. Where you can type in their strengths, their own areas of development, and they can fill these in themselves as well. Now, having a really defined IDP or individual development plan is key, because you're giving ownership to players to develop away from you, and you're giving ownership to players to develop in their club environments. Now, if you do it really well, you're going to be having coaches from clubs and national teams driving players in similar areas to develop. and grow. So in order to complement both domestic and international competitions and development. So they're really a really important part of a player's journey. These and like I said, this is just it's actually done by a friend of mine. You can see his Twitter tag there, so you can track him down. They're a great tool and a really exciting thing that kids buy into really well at the moment. So that's worth checking out. But I think the process I want you to think about is the fact that there is a two-way development plan. And it's not just me telling you, it's you going, these are my areas. And I would also adapt this to say how and when. So when and what am I going to commit myself to doing, and how am I going to do it? Sometimes writing it down helps you commit to it. Just saying it's probably not enough. When you write it down, it just changes it a little bit. So doing that together works really well. Couple of things as we cruise through these in terms of talent ID. We have got to be careful. There's a couple of red flags to think about, and I won't read this out word for word, but it's probably worth mentioning that Barcelona did carried out some research into their football, futsal, basketball, and handball and roller hockey teams. That's all. Barcelona have all of those as professional sides. And they were looking at the relative age of players within those teams, and what they found is that they had the highest percentage of players born in the first quarter of the year. So, in England, for example, because of the school year that we run from September to December, if you are older, what they're saying is that most of those children are getting selected early. They're the ones being selected, and the highest percentage of those older children are being selected in and over the players perhaps born in sort of June, July, August, the summer births. And that's a risky thing, because between the age of 10 to 15, it's noticeable, but anything older than that, it does balance out. And the challenge is that we are not looking at, or we're turning down opportunities to look at players based on current status or current performance. And in an ideal world, you can wave a wand and go, what's going to happen? What are you going to look like in 5 years' time? So in terms of performance, it's really hard to see. You look here, you've got two kids in the same age group, same age, but going to offer vastly different outcomes on the pitch at this moment. But when they're both 16, 17, they'll look really different. And actually, you could argue either way that the lad who's smaller here at the moment is probably going to have to really learn how to stay on the ball. Probably going to have to learn really how to use his body to shield the ball and to be effective and how to be impactful in a game. So I think that's of something to consider, because if he gets released based on the fact that the other one's bigger and stronger at the moment, well, how do we know that who's going to be the stronger player in 5 years' time? So it's really important that we understand the relative age effect, and that we're not just only looking at the bigger and stronger, because it always balances out. So whatever environment you're in, and this is one of the first things I always do in any, whether it's grassroots or not, I will look to see who are my oldest, who are my young, who are my summer born, because 10 months of that age is huge. The younger you are, the bigger the difference. So that's if you think about a 10-month-old and a baby, someone just been born, there's a massive difference. The differences carry on through about what they can and can't do until much later on. So that's something you need to bear in mind. I'd encourage you to look at that in your team environments as well. Another thing to consider in terms of talent ID is, what are you looking for? I've said already quite flippantly, we were looking for two players. The real question is, what sort of two players? Do I need a goalkeeper? Do I need a winger? Do I want the exact same player? Do I want robots on the side? Do I want the same players that I can just play the same tactics? Or do I want a toolbox where I've got strong players who can hold the ball up on their own? I've got tricky wingers who can attack 1v1. I've got variety. Now that's got to be led by your own philosophy, your own coaching philosophy and your own development philosophy and pathway. And that's what you need to think about as well in terms of your talent idea. What are you trying to discover? How useful is it to you to have developed 10 wingers or 10 defenders? Might be amazing, but is that what at an international level, is that what we needed? No, we were quite aware of what we wanted and what we were looking for, but I think it's important to think about what variety you want on the bench, so you can turn, and that's the skill of coaching, is to choose the right tool at the right time. So that's a fairly quick whistle-stop tour through our Talent ID program in England. I'd like you to have a little think about what it looks like in your environment. What does it look like in your coaching, and what does it look like as you go on, as your kids get older, that you're working with? And are there any similarities, or is there any other information that you want to know? I don't know, Jeffrey, whether you want to jump in here now.
Thank you very much, Ben, for a great piece. I have a question inside here from Johan. Johan, do you want to ask a question, or should I read it out? I will open up the floor. Is Johan in?
Yes, pleasant good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, thanks, Johan. Yeah, go ahead.
So Coach Tadmor was asking a question where you showed an assessment document. I was asking, is it possible that that document can be shared to us to give us that guidance as well?
Is that the scouting form? Is that what you were asking for? The scouting form?
Yes.
That one.
Yes, that one. Yes, the future player one. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's something that we can certainly. I can certainly pass on to Jeffrey, and he can pass on problem.
Great. Thank you very much, Johan. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Anybody else would love to ask a question? I know that there are some. Mr. Kodad, hand is raised. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Good afternoon, Coach. Thanks for taking the time to do this session. I know you spoke about the players in general, but specifically, I am a goalkeeper. In terms of football, I'm a goalkeeper, and that's what I played most of the time. And I know for coaches, incorporating goalkeepers tends to be a little bit difficult because maybe they don't understand the position, or they don't understand the mentality that is needed for a goalkeeper, especially as we're talking about futsal. Could you just speak a little bit about how you do talent ID for goalkeepers? Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Firstly, it's probably important to recognise that in futsal, the goalkeeper is probably the most important player on the team in terms of their ability to not only stop goals, but also to create. So having a very good futsal goalkeeper makes your life a lot easier. In terms of coaching with the futsal, with a goalkeeper, for me it's quite simple. In futsal, my philosophy will always be 2 goals, directional games. So is everything? Can we make futsal as close to the game as possible in any practice we do? So can we be attacking? Can we be defending? Whatever we've got, so we've always got. So there'll always be a need for a goalkeeper. In terms of talent ID, I should add that we would have a specific goalkeeper talent ID form, and then we were looking at for certain attributes in order to find those goalkeepers. Now, the talent pool for goalkeepers is even smaller than the talent pool than we have got for outfield players. our most successful goalkeeper for England, and he ended up playing in Italy, profession in Italy, and was fantastic, was actually a wicket keeper in cricket. As a child, he got released at 12 by a football academy as an outfield player, then went into cricket, I should say, and only started playing futsal at university. So in one of those university programs where I talked about education and goalkeepers, he managed to transfer from another sport into become a futsal goalkeeper. That was our England number 1. Our England number 2 went to university as a boxer and then came out as a futsal goalkeeper. So the journey to being a goalkeeper in futsal is pretty varied. I would ask that all the way through your youth ages, everyone's having the chance to experience and play, as a goalkeeper, and no one is stuck in goal the whole time. I think that'll be important. I think they need to experience all those angles. And if you can get an outfield player being a futsal goalkeeper, the outfield element of the game is already covered. So I would suggest that is a much preferred way of doing it. But in terms of talent ID, yeah, we have a separate form that we would use in order to look at their distribution, their shot stopping, physical attributes like flexibility as opposed to speed. What are their distribution like with their feet? What's the distribution like with their hands? The variety of their hands. So there's a whole load to go through. It's a great question, but yeah, it's really important that we have a goalkeeper and we're specific with them around our talent ID around that. I'm not sure if that answers anything you've asked me.
Actually, that was a very appreciated answer and a bit of insight. With the form that you're talking about, similar to what Junan would have asked, could you make that form available as well?
I'm writing notes down as we speak. Yeah, that's fine.
Right,
While Ben writes notes, anybody else want to ask questions? I saw that our Surinamese counterpart, Rolf, is in the house. Hi, Rolf, if you're still here with us. Anybody else want to have any other questions? Yes, Patrina, this will be recorded and will be up on our social media page. Yes, it will be recorded.
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Mr. Maxwell.
All right. One of the questions is, can you tell me how much development centers do we have in London right now? And the next thing is that if when players are development centers between the age of 12 to 17, how much days a week would you say that they put in the hours of training? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Good questions. So in terms of development centers, I'm going to assume, do you mean within the England program?
Yes, especially, yeah, and in the London area, I'm looking at, first of all.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, so actually there isn't one at the moment. So the reason that everything on my on my CV is former is because they've actually paused, the FA have paused the England futsal program at the moment. So there's no pathway at the moment, but it will come back. So when we did have it, we had one in the south of England and then we had one in the London area. What you've got are some brilliant clubs. So if you're talking London specifically, my first port of call would be to go to something like Bloomsbury Futsal Club, and they have academies already running. If I said to you that there are football academies are probably playing twice a week and then match days, maybe 3 times a week, depending what category they are and training, I would expect you to be doing that between the age of 12 or 17 as well, in order to be getting anywhere near an England program. So 3 times a week plus matches.
And as regard to that question that was asked by Mr. Maxwell, it made me, I'm asking a question as regards to long-term elected development, LTAD, and the incorporation of multiple sports at that age. In terms of talent ID, how would you encourage multiple sport involvement and engagement from our futsal players? And if so, what specifically would you suggest?
Good question. So multi-sports are proven to develop more well-rounded athletes. Early specialization in sports is proven to not necessarily create success. It can cause physical development problems because you're only conditioning yourself in one way. But more than anything, it just, the love of the game and the reason you played it is the biggest challenge. So early specialization for me is a no-no. I'm all about multiple sports and trying them. In terms of transferable skills, which I think is where you're going, futsal was considered or is considered enough of a different sport to be played as to be considered a multi-sport as opposed to football. So playing futsal and football isn't the same thing because futsal offers you something very different. We're looking for other areas which will help you develop. Basketball, in terms of working in small spaces, in terms of passing patterns, in terms of individual development, gymnastics, parkour, anything like that where you are becoming and developing as an athlete, amazing for you. But with that, I would say that in terms of development, it's very much an individual thing, and it will be down to each individual person. But if you've got time and your education is not being affected, as much as you can.
As the Futsal and Trinidad and Tobago, we have just been birthing. We are really starting, and the association is really putting things in place to continue development and the execution of our strategic plan, which also speaks to the fact that we have, and you have depicted here, we have national futsal players. How do we now incorporate national futsal players into working with coaches when it comes to talent ID? And bear with me as regards say dogs in background, my apologies.
It starts with a philosophy. It starts with a clear plan that you're all working towards. So if you have that and you have an idea of what you want to reach holistically and the environment you want to create, that's the starting point. So those players who have had those experience and working with coaches, if you are a former player being a coach now, it's a time of reflection where you would go, what would have helped me? What was I clear on? What wasn't I clear on? When I was in the heat of battle on the court, what did I need more of? And it's that reflection process which will be vital. And to get that information from them. And you could put that into the four corner model. You could easily go, what did I need technically? What did I need tactically? What did I need physically? And what did I need psychologically and socially in order to be successful? And if you could get that feedback from those players and you could share that with coaches, and together you've got a plan there almost ready made for you.
One other question for me, and guys, please chime in because we only have 10 more minutes before we call it a day. I see that as a talent lead, you were very data driven. Walk us through what software, hardware, what was it taught by the FA? What was your thought as regards to data, being data driven, and noting that England will come back again when it comes to futsal? What would you add? What would you add to that to collecting of data?
Okay, so any data that we had was used to support our subjective views. It wasn't to override them, but it was to support them, and I think that's important to be clear about. The data we used in the pathway was no more complicated than those scouting forms, but having a really clear pattern. Match day data and prep and training data and prep were slightly different. So the analysis software we used, which I'm sure you've heard of before, was Huddle. So we use Huddle to help us, the players, to review, help the coaches to clip and review film of opposition and of self. so we can review and develop from there. We did that in training as well. So what we started to do was set training up with a video of going, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. They'd go out and do it on the court and there's training. Then that would be recorded. Then it would be clipped and sent back to them for them to review themselves. And then there'd be a meeting about that performance and that development in those areas. So film very much. In terms of statistical data, futsal is actually ahead of an awful lot of software. It's catching up now. But if I said to a football analyst that perhaps has to clip 12 shots in a game, that in a futsal game, you could have 80 to 100 shots. The challenge for them and the speed and intensity of the game meant that in terms of data analyst, it's much harder to come across at the moment, especially in the international program, because we would always play 2 games in 3 days or 2 games in 2 days. And the turnaround time just didn't allow you to do it. So a lot of the data we looked at was actually retrospectively and not necessarily live, as it were. We started to look at a system where we would talk about impact, and we would try and discuss an impact of a decision. So if I played a forward pass and it split defenders, and I was in the creating third of a futsal court, what impact did it have on the game? And they would have various measures against it. And then we would start to look at traits in those players. And it could only be just so we could turn around and go, you need to pass forwards more. Here's why. This is what the data is telling us. This is what the video is telling us. Is this anything you didn't know? And 9 times out of 10, the player would go, no, I thought that was the case. You'd often get the players who go, I think I'm doing it, coach. I think I'm already doing that. And that's the one where you can give them the information and go, actually, the fact that you turn down forward passes, the impact is this. Well, actually, our players have run on further than the opposition now. We're now outnumbered, we're underloaded, and we've ended up conceding possession in our final third because you didn't play forwards in that first 2 meters. So we started to look at that, and that's more along getting to look at what we wanted long-term rather than short-term. And that's going back to what you're saying about the long-term athletic development plans, isn't it?
And I really want to let coaches be aware, as was said, the long-term athletic development of the player. And this talent ID is for the long-term development of the sport of futsal as well. And let's be very mindful of that. So again, I'm opening up the floor to anybody who have any questions, that we can be able to answer the questions accordingly. Anybody have any questions? Yes, Johan.
Pleasant good afternoon again. The question, all right, I'm a young coach into this sport, and I use futsal as a means of developing my athletes in terms of their individual skill. And just recently, like a week ago, I had a session, and 2 or 3 of my young athletes were saying, Coach, man, we had to do this drill again. This is boring. And when I showed them the actual drill in an actual game situation, how important it is, they then got that excitement to continue. So the question I want to ask is it okay to show them in a game situation at times how important the drill is to keep them informed or keep them focused on the simple drills in development?
Yeah, I think sharing the journey is vital. I think trying to get their buy-in to where you're going is really important. I think that's coaching. That's creating the right environment where they go, okay, I see this, I get this. If I'm being really picky, I would say to you, if we can try not to use the word drill and try and create practices, and try and make them as game realistic as possible. So if I said to you, I don't know what your practice looked like, if I said to you, is there an opportunity for a before action of your drill? So it might be, let's assume, I don't know, it's just dribbling at someone 1v1. Is there a before action? So can the keeper throw it out to him? And if that is the before, what about if the keeper has to make a save and then he throws it out to him? And then when he goes 1v1, if the defender tackles him, what does he then do? Does he just give the ball back, or can he drive over the line, or can he shoot? You know, so if you think about your drill, is there a before element and is there an after element that you could make it even more realistic? And from being a kid, from a kid's perspective, they might go, yeah, I get this, I like this. This is like a game, because I love playing games. But you're getting your return in terms of your repeated practice, which is what you're searching for. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, it answered well. It answered well because I was not incorporating the pre and the after the skill itself. So I will retool that and implement that pre and after.
Yeah.
To have them to understand properly and keep them that focus in it.
Good. Give it a go.
Yes, Richard. After Richard, we just have we'll take one or two more questions, and then we'll close up after that. Yes, Richard.
Yes. So I know we're generally talking about when we talk about futsal, we kind of default to adults. In terms of children, I've tried to kind of look around to see if there's any specific details to children, maybe up to 13 or 14, in terms of the size of the playing surface, the playing area that they should be on. Now I know in other capacities, in other sports, they do make they do take into consideration younger persons needing a smaller space to get more touches on the ball, whether they're playing basketball, netball, or even football for that matter. Futsal, are there, in the English system, is there any regulation specific to the size of the pitches, the same way we talk about the size of the balls?
Okay, yeah, good question. To my knowledge, we have a what's the right word? Boundaries in terms of how big and small your pitch can be, your court can be. International size is international size, so you need 40 by 20 with a maximum of 42 by 22, I think it is, or something like that. If we were going to play in the NFS Tier 1, I believe you need something like as a minimum 18 meters by 35 meters as a minimum. In terms of youth futsal and kids futsal, it just makes sense to be smaller from there. Now, we're quite lucky over here because every school has got a playground, and every playground there's pretty much a netball court on it. Or if there's got a sports hall, it's got a netball court in it. And I would normally, we're not lucky enough to have futsal courts and markings everywhere. So I normally just work from the Ds, and I would shorten it by placing both goals on the D. So I've got a shorter pitch that way. Or I'd keep one on the goal line and bring another one up to the halfway line, and just start moving it around from there and coning it off when I do. When it looks like they're running and there's loads of space around the pitch, make it small. That's what I say. If we are going to have anything official, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know off the top of my head, I will dig it out for you and I'll send that to Jeffrey as well. In terms of pitch markings, I don't think there is, because I don't think we're blessed enough with enough facilities where we can dictate that, like we do in football, for example.
Thank you.
Guys, so we are literally 1 minute away from the 4 o'clock mark. I want to say thank you very much to everyone who is on the call. But before we go, I want to read an article that was just announced and written on the Futsal Focus page, which sees a partnership written in the stars where the biggest futsal team with the biggest football club in Belgium will now start an ambitious story together under one umbrella. And I'm ending the conversation with this because I would like persons to understand, especially with a lot of the coaches here being football coaches, that we need to be able to work in tandem both football and futsal, to be able to help develop our players. Our athletes are first. So, and I will continue to say this, it is not a competition, futsal, football. It is us working in tandem, seeing how best we can grow and develop. The example used by Ben was Barcelona. And if anybody is quite aware of it, Barcelona is a sporting club. And with it being a sporting club, they have one of the best innovation clubs, and they have seen the importance of each sport for the development of their athletes. The last injury that Messi would have had, he went to the handball specialist who would have assisted him in recovery. So I want us to understand again, guys, why we're doing this and how it is we're going to do it. Continue to look out for more of the Coaches Corner later in the year as we continue to educate you and we bring the world's best to Trinidad and Tobago virtually and also in person, because Ben would be here in Trinidad and Tobago from the 7th to the 17th and would be on the court from the 11th to the 14th. So if anybody's in Tobago, please visit us at the Montgomery Hard Courts. You can call me at 787-7678 to get more information. And as the Prime Minister announced, we are reopening. Guys, I ask you all to find the tickets and come across and spend some time with us. So again, to everyone, be safe, be blessed, and have a great and a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Have a good one, guys.